but I knew I had a bigger role. And even sort of the political that I went down, that helped me connect the dots on what's happening in the world politically, what it means to our metaphysical world, and how all of that interconnects, because none of that is mutually exclusive. It's all interconnected. And the
Yeah.
people who are running the world, they know these principles that we're learning in yoga, this manifestation. They understand energy. And this is why the world, in its third dimension, in its heaviest density, is designed as it is, in order to keep us angry, in order to keep us divided, in order to keep us stuck. Because if we truly knew the power that we have, which we've just talked about on this pod, I mean, that would be devastating to those global elites. And
All right, here we go. Welcome back. Yay.
Good morning.
29th episode. How exciting. So funny because we thought maybe on the 30th episode we were going to introduce a new friend. However, after having a great conversation with my friend Tammy the other day, we decided we needed to have her on right away. So this is like a special episode. We're doing a special recording just so that we can go ahead and have this interesting talk with Tammy. She is somebody I met when I was doing the coaching stuff with Hardcore Leadership. And her story is just extraordinary. Her background, her experiences. We, as usual, are going to just like kind of launch in and let her introduce herself and tell you all about her, and then we'll see where the conversation goes. And Quentin has never met Tammy, so he gets to also be introduced to her, as the rest of you are too. So this is going to be a super fun conversation, and thank you so much for being our first guest.
I'm honored. I am honored.
All
So,
right, so Tammy, I'm handing it over to you. Tell
Okay.
us a little bit about yourself.
Yes. So I met Radha, as she said, in a program that was called Hardcore Leadership. And I was having challenges. I was a coach, and I was having challenges. And Radha was actually very instrumental in helping me have a major breakthrough. And so we became friends because of that breakthrough. And I felt like I owed her so much for helping me through this. And it brought me back to sort of a childhood painful memory and view of my older brother, which we had to sort of clear out so that I can break through in my business. So she was just brilliant at coaching me through this and helping me break through. But my journey, I always say that my journey really began around 2019. Of course, it began prior to that because I wasn't just born in 2019, but I guess that's where I had my awakening. I started to really wake up to what was really happening in the world. So the first say 50 years of my life were spent building a corporate career. I worked on Wall Street. I was super focused and very ambitious. My childhood was pretty much a normal childhood, loving parents. But then when I was 18, my mother suddenly died at a very young age of a heart attack. And really that really got me into the personal development space where I really started to learn how to help heal myself. So I had been running this parallel track, this secular corporate executive or ambitious professional who had ambitions to be an executive, and eventually I got there, but also this introduction to a more spiritual and metaphysical world that I realized just I didn't fully understand it, but I know it was helping me heal. And so I continued on that path for many, many years. And I brought a lot of what I learned into the corporate world, the studying of energy and how people are reacting. And I just became extremely intuitive, and that helped me in my corporate job. During my corporate career, I wrote a book called Lose the Gum, a survival guide for women on Wall Street, Main Street, and every street in between. And I was very passionate about helping women advance, and I won a number of awards for the work that I did. However, ironically, my career always suffered the most under the hands of women. Whether it's female bosses or backstabbing colleagues, I've always done better under the patriarchy.
Mm.
So the irony. And my Wall Street career ended by a female boss who was retiring. She and I were very good friends. She brought me into her department so that I would take over when she left. And 2 days before she left, she fired me. And it's not how I wanted to end my Wall Street career, but I was already doing the spiritual work and I knew that the universe had a bigger plan. I was already dissatisfied because of the relationship, because my relationship with my boss had gone sour, and she put me in the penalty box for about a year. And I'm a person who needs to be heard. Like that's sort of my human need is I need to be heard. I can't be silenced. And so I was very unhappy, and my colleagues were like, "You're going to be running the group. Just wait it out, ride it out." And that never happened. She shit canned me before she left, and it was a typical sort of Wall Street fu, like literally 2 days before she retired.
Mm.
And I just knew that I was supposed to do something else and something more. I didn't know exactly what that was, but because I wrote the book, I was already coaching, I was already doing some work there. I had spent 8 years in my Wall Street career working in HR, in learning and development, building programs. So I was already doing this coaching at some point. I had at the time that I got fired gone back to the business. So I had left HR and gone back to the business, but I did always have a passion and an interest for the entire personal development space. So I knew that there would be something involving that. So I leave Wall Street and I'm not yet ready to leave the corporate world. I'm still unsure if I'm supposed to go in a completely different direction or if I'm supposed to continue and just find another job. So I started interviewing and I realized that I really just am done with the industry because it was after the financial crisis. They over-regulated the industry. You couldn't do the things that you used to be able to do, and it just wasn't fun anymore. It was a lot of compliance work, and it was just a lot of just not inspiring, innovative work like it was before the financial crisis. So I kind of was like, I sort of don't want to do this. And, it came to me when I was interviewing at Wells Fargo, and the vice chairman called me, and I knew him, and he said, they're going to make you an offer, but part of the deal is you're not allowed to speak about your book. And I was going on like a circuit. I was speaking about the topics and helping women, and like you're not allowed to talk. again, not in line with my core values. And so I really started to shrivel in my seat, like as I'm talking to him on the phone, and I started to like really wilt and contract. And that was the day I knew it was time to leave Wall Street. And I was like thinking to myself, I don't even want your stinking job. And in fact, I'd be embarrassed to say I worked at Wells Fargo. Like, go F yourself. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yes. So I decided, okay, I'm going to start this coaching business. And I did. And my initial program that I launched was a group program where I helped mid to late career professionals reinvent themselves. And they always say you are your client. And so I was coaching, I had a group program, and financially I was doing very well right out of the gate. And then it was about 6 months in, and I had done some other things as well. I ran for political office in New York City. I had done a number of different things. I was sort of reinventing myself. I
Yeah.
felt like my life is just a blank sheet of paper. I have all these amazing skills, having worked in the corporate world, and I can do anything. Maybe I'll move to France and write another book. And I just had all these like things, all these
Yeah, a lot of
dreams.
time. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
you know. And then I'm like, well, you know what? I think I need to figure out a career and how I'm going to make money. So I settled on the coaching, and my first year in business was very, very good. And then after the election, I lost the election, and I was just tired and burnt out. And then I said to myself, do I even like doing this? And that kind of scared me because I kind of put all my eggs into this basket.
Yeah.
And that's when I feel like the journey really, really began. And I was very stressed coaching. And I was stressed because clients were coming to me really struggling financially, having lost their job because it was right at COVID, not even having an opportunity to go back even after COVID would have resolved itself. Like they were really using this as an opportunity to restructure. So people were coming to me and they were like, you're my only hope. And I felt immense pressure and this tremendous sense of duty to help these people. And I was like, I'm going to get these people new jobs and new careers if I have to go on that interview myself. Like I was like, I gotta like carry these people over the finish line somehow. And that was very stressful. And whenever I would talk to more seasoned coaches, they're like, you can't take on that responsibility. And I didn't agree. I felt like it partially is your responsibility as the coach to make sure your client is getting results. Like I didn't agree with a lot of what coaches were saying and teaching. And they also said, don't let your don't let your clients have unfettered access to you. Make sure you set boundaries. And I kept saying to my clients, listen, if you're having a problem, you're struggling, you wake up, you're stressed, call me, or text me and we'll set up a call. And I gave them that extra support, and no one abused it. No one ever abused it. And I always said, I always tell this sort of story. One time I was on Twitter and I texted back and forth with Mark Cuban, and then he gave me, and it was on a topic on healthcare, and he had this idea, and I said, do you all already have some kind of proposal? And he's like, yeah, send me your email address and I will send it to you. So then I had an email conversation with Mark Cuban. And so I always said to my clients, if Mark Cuban could reach out to me and talk to me, then surely I could allow my clients, additional access. And I sort of did that as the bar. And it was crazy because I was essentially a nobody. So for Mark Cuban to engage with me was pretty incredible as well. But I always kind of look to that and say, this guy was, this is a decent guy, and if he can do it, so can I. So these were things that were shaping my view on how I wanted to serve my clients. But I was still very unsure of, I didn't even know what. Like somebody said, what do you want? And I was just like a deer in the headlights. And this one coach said, you can't answer that question because you don't even know who you are. And that really hit home.
Yeah.
And so in January, it was sort of very crazy. I'm a big believer that the universe is just, laying out the breadcrumbs for you. And so I'm in Florida for a few days on some R&R, and another coach says, I'm so jealous that you're at this, you're on the beach somewhere, and she's from Canada. And I said, well, we're going into lockdown. Why don't you and I rent something somewhere, like on a beach somewhere? And I'm thinking Florida. And she's like, well, one day I'm going to buy a place in Costa Rica. And I go, let's go there. I've never been there. And so and we're planning the trip, and we're going to stay at her cousin's place. And so I do no research. That's sort of my MO. When I travel, or when I used to travel, friends would be like, hey, we're going to go here. Do you want to come with? And I'm like, perfect. Like, just tell me where I write the check. If they do the work and the research, I'm like sort of all in. So I'm kind of letting her organize this whole thing, not doing any real research on Costa Rica. And then 2 weeks before, we're on a coaching call and someone's like, oh, are you excited about your trip? And I could tell by her body language that, okay, something's off. Like, I'm getting a sense she's not going. And I just tell this detail because these are all things that I also started to learn. Like, I was very good at picking up this kind of vibe when I worked in corporate. I now teach this in a negotiation class that I'm teaching women. So these are all little things, these little subtle things that we pick up, and sometimes we're not even conscious of it. But I noticed by her reaction that something was off. So I call her up and I said, what's going on? And she's like, I'm getting pressure. We're in lockdown here in Canada. And, I don't know. I'm not going. The trip is off. And so obviously you can't stay at my cousin's place now either. So now I have no place to stay. So I go to bed thinking, okay, I guess the trip is off. And I wake up and my inner voice was like, oh no, you are going. And I was like, okay. And I was like, I already bought a new bathing suit, so I guess I'm going.
Not waste that new bathing suit.
I know. And I was like really nervous because I had, I traveled all over the world, but I also traveled a lot with my corporate job where you have, a car picking you up at home, a car picking you up at the airport at the country you're staying at. I mean, you have all these sort of perks and you're very sort of isolated and protected. And it's been quite some time since I just went somewhere to a country that I don't know for 3 months. And I was like, and I did no research on Costa Rica at all. So I didn't know anything really about the country.
Yeah.
But I also was introduced to a travel agent who a friend told me to call before I booked my trip to Florida. And I was like, I don't think I need a travel agent for Florida. But I called her anyway. She got me free breakfast at my hotel and we became friends. And so I call her up and I'm like, yo, what do you know about Costa Rica? And she's like, I just got tons of paperwork on Costa Rica, so let me help you. And so she booked me into a place in Costa Rica, and then I found an Airbnb that I stayed in for a couple months after. But I went on this trip by myself, and it ended up being beyond my wildest imagination. Like, first 10 minutes, like I get to the hotel, I like get sort of settled, and then I'm like, I need to go to the beach because I'm pale as a ghost. And so on my way, I meet this guy. He's from Chicago. He's living there. We have this whirlwind romance, and it's like fun, exciting. And then I find out he was a thief, and he was like, told me he had this house outside of town, but he actually lived in a tent, in this like surf camp, and he wasn't a surfer, but he just lived there. And then I was kind of sure that he might have been like part of like a Colombian drug cartel. So there was that.
Probably. Yeah.
I mean, was just sort of and I said that to him. I was just like, I feel like you're like part of the like Colombian drug cartel. And he's like, what? And I was like, well, none of your stories ever matched up. And then, like, I don't know. So there was this whole like craziness, and the whole thing was just insane. It was just insane. But and I was working while I was there. I actually did one of Shanda's programs while I was there, List Builder. And so I was trying different things in my business as well. And even people in Costa Rica were like, gosh, you work so much. And I'm like, not really. But, I was spending the mornings working, and then I would go and watch sunset. And I just kind of was very open, and just like I would be going to the supermarket and someone would start walking next to me and they'd say, hey, where are you going? And I'm like, supermarket. They're like, do you want to go on a boat instead? And I'm like, yeah. And so then I'm on a boat, and then they're like, well, we're not going back to Tamarindo, we're going to Mexico. And I'm like, of course we are. So it was just these insane experiences. And, part of me was really struggling with, I should be home working. I should be building this business. And I was still very programmed into this hustle energy that I had to really peel back. And that took a lot of time. And as I'm trying things in my business, I'm like, I don't know, maybe I'm focused on the wrong clients, or maybe I'm focused on the wrong program, or maybe I'm focused on this. And that journey took me quite some time. And what I started to realize is, first of all, pretty much everything we're told is a lie. So there's that. And it started with money. Okay, I started to have an inkling because I was like, why aren't they teaching this in school? Why don't they teach you how to balance a checkbook in school? And then I started to realize they don't want you to know. And then I was like, well, I have a very unique skill understanding money, being in finance. So that was really wonderful. And I started to explore it because so many people are scared of it. And I started to realize that money is just the biggest lever of control in our society. And we all have money wounds, and we all have money baggage. Whatever our, experience are from childhood, we're carrying these wounds with us. And if you're unaware of them and you don't heal them and clear them, they're controlling you. And every single decision that we're making every day is based on money, whether you go on vacation or not, whether you sit in business class, first class, or coach, everything, whether you buy something, everything is based on money. And, this is sort of the first, lie that I learned about. It's, that was sort of the first one. And I just kept meeting people along the way that were just sharing a different view of the world that I had never experienced. And I was very open to hearing it, because when I started to uncover that everything's a lie, then I was like, well, then I need to really be open to the possibilities that things that I never considered were true. And at one point, I sort of describe it as I felt like a spider in a terrarium. And, I had this little terrarium, this box that I'm living in, and it has like some grass and some stuff. And somehow I managed to climb out of the terrarium, get the lid off, and now I'm out in the world. And now I'm seeing things like UFOs, and now I'm seeing like crazy shit. And I'm like, wow, like, this is not really what I thought the world was. I started to even explore the concept of we live in a matrix, and how if we do, who's controlling this matrix? And I started to really learn about, consciousness, and studied a lot about the law of attraction and energies and frequencies. And it just started to really expand my mind. And I mean, it was very challenging because before I could actually get to that place where I could use that information to my benefit, I still had to shed all this programming. I had to really, first I had to let go of all the labels that I myself put on myself. Like, I had this I constructed myself. I carefully curated my persona. I knew I wanted to be a successful woman on Wall Street. And what did that look like? What kind of car does this woman drive? Where does she live? You've been to my Soho apartment. That was part of the whole image that I curated.
Yeah.
And now I have nothing. Like, now I have no Wall Street job. I have nothing to hide behind. I am like fully exposed. And when I would go to places, I was sort of conscious of that, and I was willing to allow that to be. Like, I wasn't so frightened because I've been doing personal development work for a long time. I was like, I have to let this go. I have to let this go. And I found out that people that I knew were more uncomfortable with the fact that I no longer had nothing than I was.
Yeah.
Like, anytime I'd say, well, I kind of don't really have a job right now, and they're like, no, but she spent 26 years working in finance. It was like they were more uncomfortable with the fact that I didn't fit into any bucket at all.
Yeah.
And so it was sort of really, really interesting. But it was a lot of peeling back the layers and really trying to learn who I am. And I just kept repeating those questions and saying, who am I? Like, in my essence, who am I before I became programmed, before my parents put their ideas onto me? And I challenge myself all the time and say, do I like that? Do I even believe that? Or did that come from someplace else? So there was a lot of deep work, journaling and meditation that really helped me connect. And I was so disconnected. I was just, and I thought I had my shit together. And I really didn't realize it. And then, I remember I was in a coaching program, and I became friends with a lot of coaches. And I remember I kept calling them and asking their advice for like every little detail. And finally, this woman who I became friends with said, did you used to be like this on Wall Street? And I'm like, no, I used to make the decisions and then get in trouble later and stuff. And I realized, because I had known my job and because I had the system sort of protecting me in a way, that I was okay. Like, all my power came from these external forces. And once they were gone, I was like this scared, insecure girl. And I was like terrified. Everything scared me. like, oh my God, am I going to be able to make money? Like, what am I doing? Like, venturing off in Costa Rica. And that wasn't even just the 3 months I spent there. I mean, I continued to go back for months at a time and continued to, explore and do work. And then I got sick with a medical condition that put me on the couch for 6 months. And it left me with no energy other than to cook my meals and to read books on geopolitics and watch documentaries on basically down every conspiracy rabbit hole you could ever go down. And then I got utterly depressed and was like, I got to get out of here. And then I went back to Costa Rica. But because I had this medical condition, I was also looking at holistic cures. So I was down that path as well and doing all sorts of holistic healing and quantum healing, and I was just meeting all sorts of people. I got exposed to, PEMF, pulse electromagnetic frequency, and I started to learn about remagnetizing your cells, and I was just meeting all these interesting people. And then I started to explore plant medicine, and maybe that's the answer. And so when I went to Costa Rica, I explored plant medicine and had done ayahuasca.
I love that she's like touching on all these topics that we just talked about in the last podcast. It's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah.
I mean, it's like your continuation of the podcast we just had.
Honestly. I was like, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So you brought up something that I thought was interesting. You were like, you kind of started to awaken and like learn new things, but then you realized you had all of this baggage that you had to work through. Can you like share a couple of those things? Like pretty much all of our society, or at least you could say like especially my generation, we were rewarded for like taking the corporate path in some way, shape, or form. And
Which is another lie.
yeah, and then like obviously like a lot of people that get on the corporate track, you're like, okay, you want to be an executive or something like this. So can you talk through some of the things that you embodied as a part of your persona? There's Manhattan version of Soho, but you can think of pretty much every major city has their version of like that corporate lifestyle, that nice neighborhood, and a nice spot. You're paying, however much for your rent or your mortgage, and you have a nice car. Like, what are some of the things that you had to unpack and unlearn, that you saw that you accumulated that wasn't really you, that might like someone else that's listening to this could probably most likely relate to in some way?
Well, I think that the persona that I created was in line with me. Like, I don't think that it was disingenuous, because I really truly did love my career on Wall Street. Before the financial crisis, when I had a lot of autonomy on Wall Street, I was always someone who I always kind of thought more like an entrepreneur than a corporate person. And I also was a rebel. So when I was at JP Morgan, and this is old Heritage Morgan, not the current JP Morgan that exists today, but in the old JP Morgan, they really encouraged people to be freer thinkers. As long as you sort of fit the culture, then they encouraged innovative and creative thought. And they were really a highbrow firm, and they had a lot of intellectual capital. So they didn't have these insecurities that some other firms do. And it's really interesting how the culture of the firms really dictate how people operate within the firm. So JP Morgan always encouraged free thinking. And I always got feedback in my review that I was very contrarian, and that was appreciated because it made them better. Like when everyone was in there yesing everybody to death, I'd be like, well, hold on, let's think this through for a second. And so I was always challenging the status quo, and I got rewarded for that. So, what drove me into finance was financial. To be perfectly honest, my mother dying, my dad declaring bankruptcy, I graduate $50,000 in debt, which is about $150,000 by today's standards.
Yeah.
And growing up, my parents, they did not have money. We had the electricity was turned off frequently, and I felt very unsafe because of our financial situation. There was no money in savings. I remember my parents asking their siblings and my grandmothers for money frequently. And we had all the things. We never went hungry or anything like that. But there was never money in the bank, and there were times where there was a lot less money in the bank than other times. So I just always felt like I needed money in the bank. And I was like, I like nice things, but like, okay, I'd buy an expensive handbag, but I wouldn't buy an expensive handbag every single year. Like I have a nice car, but I still have that car. Like I don't like throw things away. I'm, not like every year I need to be with the trend. Like I invest in nice things in pieces, and I have them for the long term.
Yeah.
I never was like the first to go out and get a cell phone or a flat screen TV, and I would never upgrade every year. I mean, so I didn't like a lot of stuff. I was also, I mean, once I got a certain amount of stuff, I was like, I don't need another house with more stuff. I was good with the stuff that I had, and
Yeah.
now I was more about elevating my experiences. So I always really appreciated like experience. And like when I think about having money, like it's really just so that I like to call it, FU money, so that you could do what you want when you want for as long as you want
Yeah.
without having to worry about it. Like that's more of my goal and ambition than having more stuff. Stuff feels like it's gotten to a point where I feel like it owns you, and it hinders your sense of freedom.
Yeah.
So so I was definitely driven to go to Wall Street for money. And I really liked, I mean, I also liked the prestige of saying that I worked on Wall Street. I mean, to be honest, it's like I'm basically working for, I mean, this is like the New York Yankees. I mean, this is the big leagues. You're like working in the toughest industry, and there's tons of people that would kill to be in the job you're in, and you're in it. And so I was always really ambitious. And one thing I learned, this is after I lost my job, I was watching a video, and it was a video that was by Marissa Pierce.
Mhm.
She's the British psychologist who's on Mind Valley, and she talked about this concept of you're not enough. And she told this story about a celebrity who was really insecure, and she was like, "This is your problem. You feel like you're not enough." And so she was telling the story, and it was on YouTube. And then she made the audience, and I included myself in the audience, even though I'm watching it on YouTube. She made us repeat, I am enough," over and over. And I was like, this is such bullshit. I'm like, of course I'm enough. I'm a superstar. And I start repeating this, and all of a sudden, tears start streaming down my face. And I
Yeah.
start like bawling. And I'm like, oh my God, I realized that I don't feel like I'm enough. And I started to realize that my success was largely driven by this feeling that I am not enough. And that, and then she made us pretend to close our eyes and pretend we're in our childhood room and go back as far as we can remember to the time where we first felt like we weren't enough. And the person who made us feel like we weren't enough walks into the room. Who is that person? And for me, it was my father. And he was a great dad. I was in sports and stuff like that. But he always was like, oh, did you see that girl, how she did it? That's how you should. He was always comparing me to other people. And
Yeah.
whenever I had like, he didn't care so much about the report card. I mean, I had pretty much straight A's, but he cared about the national tests that you had to take. And I was always in the top like 2%. And he's like, why are you not in the top 1 percentile? Like there was always this but, this,
Yeah.
and even like when I married my husband, he's like, you're beautiful, but you could lose like 10 pounds. Like there was always like this but. And
Yeah.
it's like I never got this unconditional love of you are good enough as you are. And I started to realize that a lot of my decisions were based on this longing to have this kiss on the forehead from my dad
Yeah.
that will never come because now he's dead. And it doesn't matter anyway because you're never going to get it's never about them. It's always about you. And all that work has to be done really alone. You
Yeah.
don't need anybody. You don't need the forgiveness from, your mother who, did wrong by you. You don't need that. You need to address it and heal it within yourself. And then that will shift how your relationship with your mother is.
Yeah.
And so started to learn that. Go
I
ahead,
was like,
sorry.
I was like, you made me think of how, yeah, a lot of the times, like people just talk to you the way that they talk to themselves, and often it's like tough because then that means your father, you know, mom, grandma, whoever it is in your life, teacher, like that's how they think about themselves 24/7. Where, you know, using your husband as an example, and I'm in male culture very well, where it's like we look at ourselves and we're never really strong enough. You're living with that fear of what if this guy is better weapons trained and or he's stronger and he wants to hurt your family, and you're always like, and I know men are especially like that, where it's like, yeah, you're strong, but this one guy might be stronger. This one guy might have more money, and you or he might do this, and you live in that, and they teach us how to embody that insecurity, and then we look at ourselves and we go, yeah, I got this job and I make, whatever it is, 200,000 or 150 or even 50,000, but wouldn't it, but like life would be so much better if I made like this extra 10%, and you get a raise and it's only 9%, and then like there's all this, like this cycle of you don't feel like you're enough, and then you look around and then you see all this proof, like, oh man, like this person got the promotion over me, or this person like got married before me, or whatever the things are that like we want in life, and we start to like compare ourselves because we embody the feeling that we're not enough from, like you said, from those people that make us feel like we're not enough. And yeah, I had like, obviously I think all of us have certain situations. You also made me think of something too, like when I was in school, like if we really liked the job, that wasn't even really part of the question. It was like, choose your career based off of your skills.
Mhm.
Like, what are you good at? You good at math? Okay. And I remember like literally in our sophomore and junior year, we were like take the classes we're good at, and we would like put that in this form, and it would spit out like the top 10 jobs, and then it would put out the average salary. And so it was
Yeah.
like all of us are being pushed to pick a job that is financial, gives us the most pay. And then we also, and I wonder how you feel about this, like you're also kind of taught to believe that career development and personal development are like kind of the same. Like, I'm gonna get to be like, let's say I get to this next position, I'm a vice president now or an executive, but then there's
Mhm.
also what comes with that in your mind is like this level of maturity, this level of poise, this like way that you're gonna handle yourself in public like an executive. But, and I'm just using this as an example, you feel like, oh, as my career advances, I have more responsibility. Me as a person, I should be advancing too. Like I should feel more joy. I should feel more ease. I should feel more confident. But I think like that doesn't always come hand in hand, because the corporate system can reinforce that feeling of not feeling like you're
Mhm.
enough
I
and
think
use
that's
that.
one thing the three of us have in common, actually, is like this
Yeah.
trajectory that we had where we went into like these more traditional settings, got really high up in our setting, right? Wherever
Mhm.
that corporate thing took us, and we enjoyed the money. The money was really fun.
Mhm.
However, I think that we also enjoyed the security,
Mhm.
because the three of us, all three of us, a common theme, which is not just the three of us, it's everybody.
Yeah.
Money brought us a false sense of security,
Mhm.
where like I am secure and I can live in this world. And all three of us now are living in this place where we're like, we're not going to find our security in money
Mhm.
anymore. We're going to find our security within ourselves and knowing that we're enough and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's it's a it's a wonderful thing to live in that security and that money. Money is so freaking fun.
Yeah.
Money can provide you with so much fun. And you can really get caught up in the false sense of security of the
Yeah.
money and not understand that actually you're okay whether you're eating ramen noodles or whether you're eating out at the fanciest restaurant in New York. And it can all be fun and great.
Yeah. I mean, I think money's really only fun once you do this inner work, because I know a
Yeah.
lot of people that I worked with. I mean, I have friends who grew up in the slums of India and now make millions of dollars, and they still act like they're living in the slums of India. And
Yeah.
unless you really do this work, and I was just watching the Lewis House podcast, and he had somebody on it who was a brain surgeon and neuroscientist, and he learned about manifestation early on because he came from a family where he had an alcoholic father and they were in poverty on government assistance, and his mother had a stroke. And so he went and to this magic shop because he really liked magic, and the owner's mother taught him about basically mindfulness, and he started to do the work on mindfulness, and he became, I guess he was involved probably in some kind of biotech, but something he said during the dot-com boom, and he was worth he had about $80 million. And he said he was never happy. And then he lost the money and had negative $3 million in his bank account. And he said his feeling didn't change. He wasn't any more miserable without any money than he was having it. But on the outside, he had everything, the house, on the cliff, the mansion on the cliff, and the Ferraris and everything else. And he said that inside he was just still extremely unhappy. And he ended up, he said that he had something like $30 million in stock, and he ended up giving it all away. And I feel like that almost is part of my journey now too. Like I feel like in order to sort of rebuild, you've got to release it. And what he talked about is being detached from the outcome. So, but Quentin, going back to your original, comment and point, I think one of the first big lie that we are told is that we should pick a career that is practical, that is going to give us this safety, security, and a steady paycheck. And that is, I think, the first big lie, because what I've discovered in this journey is your role on this planet is to, I believe, is to find out what your purpose is, to align to that purpose, and to live that purpose while you're here. Yeah. And that purpose is somewhat challenged. I think the younger generations find it much easier than our generation because of the deep programming. And I think that there's been a raise in consciousness. So I think the younger generations are at a higher consciousness level than we are, at a higher frequency. So I think that they're sort of more with it than we were. But this is the first big lie I think that we're told. And this is why over 85% of Americans alone are dissatisfied in their job, because we were never meant to push paper for a corporation. That was just not the purpose. And this is where, going down the route.
We're all manifested on this planet to push paper for a corporation.
I mean,
that's how self wanted to experience itself, right?
There is no way that you're going to find fulfillment. Now, like when I looked at my career, my greatest joy in my career was when I was in learning and development, and I would be able to go to management. And oftentimes I didn't even have to go to management. I was just allowed to do it. I was able to create all different kinds of programs that I wanted to. And a lot of them went viral. They were hugely successful. I even hear today that some of those programs still exist and they're still running. And so they were really great ideas. And creating is what we were meant to do. And what's interesting, when we were in that HCL program, you had to kind of define yourself, and there's words that they, wanted you to sort of say, and they were almost trying to beat it out of you a little bit. And I remember I had a hard time figuring out what I was. Like people would say, I'm a powerful, strong leader, and I'm trying to find the words that really resonated with me. And the word creative came out, and that word really resonated. Like my hair stood up on the back of my head, and that was one word. And I settled on creative, powerful leader, although the other two did not resonate, but in the interest of time and getting through the exercise.
You had 3 words. What was your third word?
Leader, I think.
No, something, 3 words.
I'm a creative, powerful, passionate.
Ooh.
I still have it. I still have that board right here. I look at it every day because the one word that absolutely still resonates with me is creative. And what's crazy is at the time when I was in that program, I never considered myself a creative person. But what I've come to learn is, I was thinking of creativity as, some people just have this immense style and this eye for art. And I like design and things like that. I do like beautiful things, but I never considered myself really creative. But I do consider myself a creator. And when I started to realize that we're all made in the image and likeness of God, the creator, then that is when we are in alignment. And when I think about the jobs in the corporate world that I most liked, it was because I was allowed to build and create things. And that is why I did really like my corporate job, because I had that ability. And they let me do that. But I think that that is the first lie that we are told. And everyone thinks that again, this is the myth, that you need that safety and security of that corporate job because you're not going to make money in doing something you're passionate about. But that is completely untrue. I mean, you have the person who's wants to be a ballerina, and they settle on going and becoming an accountant, but somebody's got to be a ballerina. I mean, ballerinas do exist, and they're making good money doing
Yeah.
ballet, and
It's
people
so
are.
I didn't mean to
Yeah,
interrupt you, but like
no, 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 go, go.
it's so strange, obviously, because there's pop culture. All those musicians, all those actors, like all those child stars, like you're sitting here, like if you're me, right, you're watching Disney Channel as a kid with all these live action shows, all kids your age or younger than you. You're sitting here and you're like, wait a minute, like it's the only way. I was in. It's very ironic because you earlier you said they don't teach us how to manage money. So it's almost
Hmm.
like what's more secure, knowing how to manage money no matter how little it is, or like just making this money and then if you're a typical young kid, right? You're gonna go out to bars every Friday, every Friday and Saturday, and then spend, if you live in DC or in New York, you're spending $20 on a rum and coke, and so there's all these ideas of like, what is actually secure? Is it like just, oh, I know where my paycheck's gonna come from, and then even beyond that, right? It's like just from a and Brad and I talk about this. Like I'm a Virginian, and like so our big part of our programming was like the belief, the enlightenment thinking, and like the sort of like the thinking that predicates like the American system. And it's like entrepreneurship is like king on the list of important things. It's like entrepreneurship to me is like creativity in a way. Like you're literally
Yeah.
creating this whole thing. And then now all of a sudden they're like, we have enough businesses. Now we just need students to know how to work for the ones that already exist. And it's just so antithetical to everything. And like even entrepreneurship, which it's quote, in a way it's not secure, right? But there also is this security in the sense of like you have some level of agency over
Hmm.
like your range of possibility. It's like if you're in this corporate job, like no matter how hard I work, like maybe I have overtime, but after a certain salary, there's no overtime. But let's say you work so hard, you're like, I know that maybe 6 months from now, I might be able to get a reward from this hard work by getting that promotion when it's time for your reviews or something like that. But in entrepreneurship, it's like, okay, I could put the time in today and put in that extra work and make an extra sale or do whatever. And
Hmm.
it's not as guaranteed, but the range of possibility is much more is much
Yeah.
higher. And in that comes like another sense of security. Obviously, the sense of security is what's a fallacy in the first place. Like, you can get sick for 6 months and be on the bed, and it's like, all your little sense of security is gone. But it is interesting how like our system has decided that like these are the industries we want people to work for them. We want people to be engineers, doctors, lawyers, each of the fields we want everybody to go into and want them to idolize. But at the same time, we're gonna have like Drake and all these rappers that make hundreds of millions of dollars, but or all these singers and musicians that we also idolize, but we don't want you to be like them. Um,
Yeah.
But I mean, obviously, when yoga tells us, right? Yoga says the only the only way to have joy and peace is to rediscover it within yourself because it
Hmm.
already exists within you, and the only way to really have it is to find it within. And so you always have to look back within. There's nothing outside of yourself that is going
Hmm.
to like bring you peace, joy, love, light, all of those things in a lasting way. We've talked about how, plant medicine can give you a little hint of that, buying a new, you know, bag, purse can give you a little hint of that, but none of it is actually going to be lasting unless you're looking actually within yourself for it. And I love the fact that you, in your contract, I love that it says creativity and passion. because those are so closely linked. And if you really, and one of the things you were saying is like really finding your purpose on this earth. And
Mm-hmm.
how do you find that purpose on your earth if you were not tapping into your creativity and your passion? Because it's what you're passionate about. Like, I am passionate about sticking these silly little rhinestones on things.
Mm-hmm.
I do it for hours. I do it for days, right? It is, other people would be like, that is my own personal hell. How can you
Mm-hmm.
do that? And people watch me doing it and they're like, you are a maniac. Like, why would you do that? I love it. It's my passion. It's my creativity,
Yeah.
right? I don't have to have it be somebody else's. Do I make money doing it? No, I probably could if I needed to like monetize it, but I don't need to monetize it in life right now. But finding those things that like really tap into that energy are going to have you tap into that inner joy and inner peace and realizing it's within yourself.
Yeah.
And so, Tammy, I'm also interested, like you were talking about some of the things that you have done, like saying, I am enough. You also touched on meditation. I'd love to hear like how that journey kind of brought it, because again, I think meditation is a great way to tap into your creativity and your passion.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you quiet the mind, you actually like your true self can come forward.
Yeah.
And if there's some other things, I know you just got back from a yoga retreat in India, so I bet you had some juicy stuff that, you know, was happening there. So I'd love to hear some of the ways that also you use to tap into these things in your own personal life.
Yes. I'm just writing little notes for myself. Can I just go back and address some of the things that Quentin had said?
Yeah, we can go all over. We can have a circular
Okay. And then I'll circle back to the yoga.
circle up and down and back and around.
Yeah.
The first thing is not really something you said, but it's just something that I'd love your audience to know. And it's kind of a little bit of a harsh reality, but the powers that be that run the world, they need human beings to work in the corporation because what we are to them is just means of production and means of consumption.
Yeah.
Okay, so we make the goods or the widgets, and then they market to us and advertise to us, and we keep them afloat by buying those things. See, they manipulate us with advertising and make us think that we want that and that we need that, and that's going to give us some kind of fulfillment. So that is the big trap that we're all living in. So
Yeah.
that's sort of one thing. Then you brought up entrepreneurship. I think that entrepreneurship, it's really about becoming, because it is going to, it's not only, you having this agency, but it is when you have no sort of safety net and you have to do this all on your own, you are confronting like every wound, you're learning about yourself,
Yeah.
when you're going to sell, all your fears and insecurities, I'm not good enough, all of these things are going to arise when you're an entrepreneur. And you are going to build this mental resilience and fortitude if you end up doing it like the long haul and say, I'm never quitting. I'm seeing this through no matter what, or I die. Okay.
Yeah.
You will become an absolute different person than when you started. And I see that in my own journey. It's not just about building and selling this product. It is about who you're becoming in the process and
Yeah.
the things you need to learn in order to have that success. Like you have to face resistance. Like last year or a year before, I was saying, I'm not operating like a CEO. I need to start operating like a CEO. What does that mean? That means when I come in conflict with someone, that means when something comes up that doesn't fit right or feel right, I address it right away. I don't sweep it under the rug. I address it right away. And I start having those big boy, big girl conversations that people don't like to have. People have come to me, they want to partner in something, and then all of a sudden I'll get a sense that we're not in alignment. And instead of letting it go and us building something together and it blowing up down the line, because it will, because you're already getting the sense that it's wrong, I address
Yeah.
it right away. So I'm becoming a different person. And as I look back 5 years, I'm like, I'm a totally different person. So going back to that feeling of I was a scared little girl when I started coaching, now that I've been through this, I have a newfound sense of confidence. I don't need any of these labels anymore. And now I realize after doing all this work, nothing can hurt me. Like you can strip me of every dollar I've got. It doesn't even matter. So it's really about becoming. The third is you're talking about your joy. That is the barometer and the yardstick that we should be following. If you have a binary choice every day, do this or do that, what do you prefer? The thing you prefer is the thing that you should be doing. And
Yeah.
that is how you find your purpose, because that is leading you to your purpose. But that's again another lie that we're told, because when you're like, I want to play electric guitar, and your dad's like, no, go study math, and
Yep.
that's where that's where your dreams start to get crushed. And you're told, yes, you want this, but no, have some discipline and focus, and it's diverting you, and it's pulling you into this sort of like logical mindset, which is the worst thing you can do. You should be really following your heart. That is I think what you should be doing. Now to meditation, your question on meditation. Yes, I started meditating years and years ago, and it was like always a to-do on my to-do list. Like, okay, I've got to meditate. I know it's really good for me and everything else. And it was always my New Year's resolution, and I would never do it with any consistency. And then one day I was meditating on the ferry coming home, and my inner voice was like, move to New York City. And I was like, shut the fuck up, inner voice. I'm not moving anywhere. Like crazy. And then 2 weeks later, my house was on the market, and I was in New York City 3 months later. And I loved my house where I lived in down the shore in New Jersey. I mean, I had remodeled the whole thing. It was 100 years old, and I loved it, and I loved living there. And 2 weeks later, it's on the market, and I'm in New York City. And when I logically thought about it, I wanted sort of a bigger life, and I felt like that was the place that I was going to find that life. And my life did dramatically change. And then at some point, I started meditating more and more. Again, not with consistency, but every time I did, I would get a really big message of a major lifestyle change. That was like initially, like even when I was meditating at a retreat that I was hosting, and my inner voice was like, move out of New York City. And I was like, no way, I love my apartment. I'm never leaving. And by the end of the month, I was out of there. So there was those things. And
Yeah.
now as an entrepreneur, I feel like, I mean, I meditate every day. And, I mean, occasionally I'll miss here and there, but generally it's part of my morning practice, because as an entrepreneur, that's all you got. Like you
Yeah.
have nothing else. That's where your safety is coming from. That is where your savior is coming from. That is where your ideas are coming from. It's because your subconscious mind has such unbelievable wisdom that you need to tap into that. And it is so beneficial on so many levels. I mean, it helps you self-soothe, it regulates your nervous system. There are so many benefits of meditating. But as an entrepreneur, I mean, I've heard lots of entrepreneurs that they're like, I can meditate for 4 hours. And when I went to that retreat in India, there was days where I was meditating for 3 hours.
Yeah.
And it was really expansive and just amazing. And I'm so blessed that I was able to take that time and that space, to take a month and go spend it in India and just be in that sort of sacred land and, connecting to self.
Mm.
It's like that's awesome. I was like, can I ask you to be like a little more specific? Like what's a meditation practice that, let's just say, someone who's brand new, like a question I always get a lot is like, what is meditation? How do you do it? But like what's one that you would recommend for others to try, or like maybe a couple different styles that
Yeah. I mean, I always tell people who've never meditated before just to do 5 minutes and to really focus on their breath,
mhm.
because 5 minutes for somebody who has never meditated before is a challenge.
Yeah.
And I remember I went meditating. My brother passed away, but he lived near the Deepak Chopra Center in San Diego in Carlsbad, and they had daily meditation. So I was like, I want to go, and he's like, I'm gonna go too. And I was like, this
Okay.
guy just not, I mean, he had ants in his pants. He could not sit still. And so
Yeah.
we're in meditation, and it was a guided meditation, and it was only like 20 minutes. And I could hear him like, I could hear him like adjusting himself and
Yep.
really struggling, to,
It's
to
so true.
meditate. So 5 minutes can be hard if you haven't done it before. And I suggest always just focus on breathing in and breathing out and breathing in and breathing out, because I think, just not focusing on anything can be very hard,
Yeah.
for people. And, there's, transcendental meditation where you allow whatever thought to come in and you like see that through. I mean, I don't know For me, I just basically sit in silence and I
Mm,
try to clear my mind.
mm,
Sometimes what I'll do is I will visualize the future and the life that I want in my
Mm.
meditation practice.
mm,
That is something that also, again, part of the lies that we're told, like our imagination is so critical to us being able to manifest the life that we want, and that
yeah,
imagination gets crushed so early on.
yeah,
Like as kids, we're just so creative and we have such unbelievable imaginations, and then society just squashes it.
Yeah.
But I have learned to really tap back into that, and it's hard because it's a muscle that we haven't used in a long time, that it really takes practice. Like when I had that blank sheet of paper, I couldn't imagine the life that I want. I mean, and here I'm saying, okay, you have free reign, you could do anything. What would
yeah,
that look like? And it was still a blank sheet of paper. And now I have a lot more clarity on what it is I want and what I want my life to look like and stuff. But it took years to be able to practice and train myself on meditating. And I think all you really need to do is sit in silence and listen to the thoughts that come up. My best ideas come from meditation. The things I need to do that day come from meditation.